So our guest today is Ari Sohn, and he has over 10 years of marketing, community building, and startup experience, and is currently the director of marketing at Radial Creations, a digital ad agency in New Jersey. Additionally, he is the founder of a cemetery digitization tech startup called PreservUs, which is where the whole "Where's Grandma" thing comes in. Alongside PreservUs, Ari started an international not-for-profit volunteer agency called the UACD, United Agency for Cemetery Dignity, in which he has cleaned and restored over 15,000 graves and headstones. Ari has extensive appreciation for the Spanish language, Latin America. In 2018, he lived and worked in Medellin, Colombia, as the first director of the Medellin JCC.
Medellin.
Huh?
Medellin.
I'm sorry. I should have asked you for the pronunciation of that one.
So we're in America.
That's great. Medellin. Oh, God, I'm going to get so much flack for this one. Well, okay. Very impressive bio, very impressive story, because there's like a diverse background that you've got there, from the work you're doing with the startup of the digitization of cemeteries, which, by the way, when my grandfather passed away, he passed away a year after my grandmother did. It actually was a problem locating where her burial plot was. The cemetery mixed the records.
Oh, wow.
So we were about to bury my grandfather in a place that was not actually his plot. And it was, thank God, somebody figured it out. So something like cemetery digitization, wow, that's a hard word, is extremely important. And it's similar to what you do with, the dignity of cemeteries, which short story I'll tell afterwards as to when I was in Asheville, actually by Yermi. But those two things are kind of seemingly different than marketing, but in a way they're all somehow interconnected. So can you tell us your personal experience, like your story, your journey, how you started, like where you got started with the JCC in Medellin to the digitization, the cemetery aspect, and then to now what you do with marketing, because all of it really is about being that better person, being that greater individual. So talk to us a little bit about what that journey looked like, how you did all of that, and then, yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So in 2017, I quit my job doing digital marketing in healthcare in New York City because I had an offer to move to Medellin, Colombia, to start a JCC there. And the year prior, the year prior, I went and volunteered to run a Passover Seder there with a few friends of mine. I met the community, and they wanted someone that could kind of bring a spark to the community and do outreach and really kind of put the Jewish community on the map in Colombia. That was a really incredible experience. And when I got back in 2018, I was unemployed, had nothing to do. And my uncle in Albany, New York, reached out to me saying, "Hey, Ari, I heard you're unemployed." I like, "Thanks for rubbing it in." He's like, "Well, our synagogue here in Albany has a cemetery that's 170 years old, and we need someone to digitize it. I'll pay you $2 a grave. There are 5,000 graves. Do you want to come up to Albany for a few months and do this?" I'm like, "What the heck is cemetery digitization?" But I needed the money. So I was kind of skeptical, but in July of 2018, I went to Albany and I spent the next 4 months there, going up about every week, every other week. And I learned how to just take a photo, document a grave, put it up into some database in a searchable map, so the synagogue could have their own private catalog of these records and where the location of the graves were. And I was so embarrassed about what I was doing. I didn't tell my friends. I used to be this important person in South America.
Wow.
I met with diplomats. I was a community leader. Now here I am, unemployed in a cemetery at 26 years old.
Wow.
And I had no confidence what I was doing. I didn't want it to tarnish my reputation. So I kind of did this work in silence. But I needed the money, and I kind of, I learned to love it. So after about my second week on the job, I was walking by a row of headstones, and I found a fallen over headstone. And I asked my uncle, I called him up on the phone, like, hey, Uncle Mark, what do I do about this fallen over headstone? I can't take a picture of it. He's like, oh, you have another 5,000 graves. Just move on to the next one. But something in my heart kind of just, I don't know, went off. And I said, you know what? Let me try to do the right thing. So this headstone was no larger than an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, maybe weighed 20, 30 pounds. And I lifted it up and I cleaned it off, and it said Baby Jacobson 1914. And it turns out that it was the headstone of a preterm baby. And who knows how long this headstone was fallen over for. And the family probably hasn't visited that grave in who knows how long. And I felt like I kind of brought Baby Jacobson's memory back to life. And that's when something weird happened. I'm like, I got to do more of this. And for the next 2 months, I cleaned and restored every headstone that I found in the cemetery without telling my uncle, because I didn't want him to think I was wasting time doing work that he wasn't asking me to do. And I ran out of headstones in this cemetery. So I started breaking into other cemeteries and cleaning them up on my own. And then eventually my uncle's like, hey, Ari, I'm on to you. I know what you're doing. Thank you very much. Our community really appreciates it. And as I was doing this cemetery cleaning and I was doing this digitization, the whole time in my mind, like, I'm not a tech guy, but this software that the synagogue had me using was pretty archaic, like Windows 98 type platform. And I said, if only there was an app that did this in a sexier way, and a more like easier to understand, fluid way. Too bad I don't know how to do any of this. And I went on digitizing for another 2 months, and it was finally my last week in Albany. I was digitizing the last row of headstones, and I always wear my kippah, my Jewish head covering. And I was in the cemetery, and some car comes driving by, stops, and shouts at me, "You effing Jew," and then drove off. And this whole time, and something like really, really bothered me. And like, I've had instances of anti-Semitism before, but keep in mind, the only other person in the world that knew that I was doing this cleaning was my uncle, in addition to the digitization. And I said, you know what? I want to get back at this guy. Let me, show him who's boss. And I decided to record myself restoring a headstone. And what started as a little small rock covered in dirt in the ground, I ended up unearthing a 3-foot, 200-pound headstone of a woman who passed away in the 1850s. And I made a little time-lapse video, posted it on Facebook, not thinking any of it. And I got a few thousand views, dozens of shares. And this whole week happened to have been the same week as the Pittsburgh shooting. So all the more so that I really wanted to show some like Jewish pride. And lo and behold, 3 days after posting this video, I got a private message on Facebook from a gentleman from Manchester, England. And he said, "Hi, my name is Johnny. I'm really intrigued by the work you're doing. Our cemetery here in Manchester has been defaced and vandalized for so many years. Let's talk." A week later, I was sitting face to face with him at a cafe in Midtown Manhattan. Turns out he's a partner at a law firm, about 15 years older than me. And he says, "Have you ever thought about turning this into a business?" I said, "Well, actually, I have this idea of a digitization company." And he's like, "Oh, I want to work with you." And we went through the numbers and specifics. And in the end, I actually pushed him away twice. I didn't want to work with him. He offered 6 figures worth of funding right up front on the first time I met him. And I said, "I don't want you jumping on board just because you think you can make $1 off of doing what's right." And Johnny said, "How about this? I will quit my job at this law firm and I will put my time in so you know that I'm doing this because I believe in your mission." And I said, "Okay." And I want one other condition, that every cemetery that we digitize, we have to continue doing the cleanings for free. The only reason we met is because I cleaned the headstone because it was the right thing to do. And here we are 3 years later. Johnny is a co-founder of PreservUs. And what went from me being embarrassed about the work I was doing has become part of my identity. And I love it.
That's incredible.
Guys, is this not the greater person? I mean, like, is this not the, like, I'm blown away by this story, like, straight up. And I'm going to leave it to the audience to make their conclusion. But